I'll tell you this story like it happened to me. I caught my girlfriend in the act cheating with one of my closest friends. It was hard to watch and I couldn't just stand there and do nothing. I had him busted and that was the end of it. I severed all ties with her right then and there. My wife Rachel and I grew up in a small town, a place with maybe 30,000 people at most. We had known each other since we were kids, around 6 years old in fact. We were inseparable, always there for each other. When we turned 16 we started dating and at 18 we moved to a city a few hours away to start working. We were ready for the next chapter. 2 years later at 20, we got married and bought our first house. Life was moving along smoothly, and at 22 Rachel found out she was pregnant with a boy. We were excited, everything was falling into place. But then everything shattered. About 5 weeks before her maternity leave was set to start, a shelving unit at her workplace fell apart, crashing down on her. It was a freak accident that no one could have predicted. They told me she and our baby didn't survive, that they were gone instantly. 2 of her co-workers were also hurt. One ended up paralyzed, the other lost a leg. It didn't take long to find out that the company she worked for had been cutting corners, keeping old, unsafe shelving instead of replacing it, all to save a buck. I can't tell you how much hate I feel for the executives and managers who made that choice. It wasn't just a mistake. It was negligence, and it cost Rachel and our son their lives. Not long after I was given the news, the company offered me a settlement. They called it compensation, but I saw it for what it really was: blood money. I could take it or I could fight them. I wanted justice. The case went public and it got a lot of media attention. Even a few politicians took notice and got involved. I wasn't going to let it slide. After about 3 years we finally managed to settle the case in court. I walked away with nearly 10 times what the company originally offered me. The company was hit with massive fines for safety violations, and a whole bunch of executives got fired. Some of them even ended up behind bars. It felt like a small victory, but I would have traded it all to have Rachel and our son back. Through all of this, I kept my head down and continued working at the telecommunications firm. My mom, bless her, moved in with me to help me get through the rough patches. Honestly, I have no idea how I would have made it without her. Around that time, I was offered a promotion which meant a lot more traveling. So, I requested to open an office branch in my hometown. My employer didn't have anyone representing them there, and it seemed like a good idea to be able to balance business and being back home. They agreed, and soon enough I fell into a routine. I'd spend 1 or 2 weeks in the city office, then 1 week in my hometown, and travel to other parts of the state for another week or 2. About a year later, I decided to buy a house in my hometown. It made sense. I didn't want to keep crashing at my parents' place every time I came back. I needed a place of my own, a home base I could come and go from, and that detail plays a big part in what happened next. 4 years went by, and one Friday I had just gotten back from a trip. I was catching up on work at the local office when Harry, the branch manager, walked in. Harry and I had grown up in the same town, though we went to different schools. Over the years we became close friends. After I moved back home, Harry asked how I was doing and then invited me to a party at his place that evening. It was kind of last minute, but I figured why not? I could use a beer and some time with friends. That's where I met Catherine. She had just started working at the branch in my hometown and was still getting settled into the job. She was new to the area, just trying to find her place. We hit it off right away. I know it sounds like a cliché, but it really felt like I'd found that spark again after losing Rachel. I won't go into all the details, but after 2 years of dating, we decided to take the next step. Catherine moved into my house in my hometown, and for a while, everything seemed perfect. She got along well with my parents, and Rachel's parents liked her too. It felt like maybe, just maybe, I could find happiness again, even if it was just a fraction of what I had with Rachel. Everything stayed good for nearly a year, until I started noticing little things. Whenever I was away, our video calls would suddenly get shorter. Neighbors mentioned seeing a car that looked like Harry's parked behind my house while I was out of town. And then I started finding random items in my closet that definitely weren't mine. All the signs pointed to cheating, but Catherine swore up and down that everything was fine. Harry was just stopping by for work stuff, she'd say. He never stayed the night. I tried to tell myself I was just being paranoid, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Then about 6 months later it all came crashing down. I found out for sure she'd been lying to me. I had just closed a major contract for a new client, and the negotiations wrapped up sooner than I expected. Instead of staying a few more days, I decided to surprise Catherine by booking an earlier flight home. I wanted to catch her off guard and see how everything was going. After a couple of hours of driving from the airport, I got to my hometown. I parked behind my house in the alley, hoping I could sneak in and give Catherine a little surprise. But there was something else I was curious about too. I wanted to see if that mysterious car I'd been hearing about was parked there again. Sure enough, there was a vehicle blocking the back entrance. For a moment, I thought maybe it was just some rude neighbor's car. Then I realized it was Harry's. I pulled up behind his car, confused. Why was he here so late? Catherine always insisted he left early whenever he stopped by. As I walked toward the house, I saw something through the kitchen window that stopped me dead in my tracks. My stomach dropped to the floor. There in my kitchen was my best friend Harry getting busy with my girlfriend on the counter. I froze in place like everything around me had gone still. I couldn't even process what I was seeing. My mind was screaming, "Is this real? Is this actually happening in my own home?" The shock hit me like a freight train, and all I could do was stand there paralyzed. I couldn't even move, watching them right there in my space doing that. After what felt like forever, I managed to sneak back out without being noticed. I got in my car, sat there for what seemed like hours just crying. I felt completely shattered. But as the tears dried up, something else took over. That heartbreak turned into a deep burning rage. Rage like I'd felt when I was fighting for justice after Rachel's death. I wanted to hurt them, to make them feel the pain they'd caused me. But at my core, I wasn't the kind of guy to lash out physically. Even with all that anger, I knew I couldn't go down that path. I knew I couldn't just let this go, so I decided to punish them in the only way I could think of: destroy their lives. I drove down the alley far enough so they wouldn't see me, then parked near the gate, just far enough to keep an eye on Harry's car. From there I called Catherine. They were still in the middle of things when her phone rang. I could see them exchange a panicked glance as they looked at the caller ID. Catherine hesitated for a moment, like she was debating whether or not to pick up. In the end, she didn't. I could hear them go back to what they were doing, but I wasn't going to let it slide. I called again. This time she answered. The second she said, "Hello," I hung up. I didn't stick around. I headed back to my car. But it wasn't long before she called me back. She was asking why I was calling so late. I told her I'd be home in 10 minutes. I didn't want to freak her out by barging in unexpectedly. She pretended to be excited, acting like she was thrilled I'd be back soon. She ended the call by saying she needed to change clothes. I said goodbye and hung up. A few seconds later, I watched as Harry came running out of my backyard, half-dressed, jumping into his car and speeding off like his life depended on it. I couldn't help but smile to myself, imagining the terror they must have felt, thinking they were about to be caught. It felt like a small victory, knowing how close they came to being exposed. I waited for a bit, then parked exactly where Harry's car had been just minutes before. The rest of the night went pretty much as usual. Catherine and I went through the normal welcome home routine, but once she fell asleep I couldn't rest. I got up and went down the hall to my office. Sleep wasn't an option. I needed a plan. And that's exactly what I set out to create. My mom had always taught me to be a pacifist, to let karma work things out on its own. But in this case, I figured karma could use a little push. I wanted to punish them both, but in separate ways, ruin them without mercy. I knew Harry was into some substances. Nothing too heavy, but enough that he kept it discreet. I had stumbled upon it by accident. Saw some white powder and weed when I was at his place once. He tried to hide it, but I'd already seen. I pretended like I hadn't noticed. So I started reaching out to some less than reliable contacts, quietly asking around for more product. Over the next few weeks, I built up enough of a stash to fuel my plan. About a month later, I threw a barbecue for some friends, including Harry. I made sure he had plenty to drink. As the night wound down, I suggested he crash at my place. The next morning, I took some of the stash, plus a few of my personal items, and carefully stashed them all over his car. The bulk of it went in the compartment for his spare tire. I knew he wouldn't find it for months, just long enough for me to get everything else in motion. I locked Harry's car and went back to bed, feeling the weight of what I had just set in motion. Later that morning when I drove him home, He was too drunk to drive himself. I slipped some more of the powder along with a few of my own items into his house. The plan was coming together perfectly. A few days later, I staged a break-in at my own place. I smashed the glass on the back door leading into the kitchen, left it ajar, and then I left for the airport. Once I landed, my phone started buzzing nonstop. I had a message from my mom, sounding panicked because she'd found the broken door and had called the cops. Catherine's message was full of tears, and there was also one from the local police asking me to call them back. I told the police I was on a business trip and wouldn't be home until next week. Meanwhile, I texted Catherine, asking her to stay at my parents' place until I got back. I also asked my dad to hire a local security firm to install cameras and an alarm system. When I finally returned, I made sure to put on the expected show. I acted shocked. Oh my God, I can't believe someone broke in. Why would they do that? After we checked every room and noticed some of my personal items were missing, I filed a police report and had a security representative come by. He explained the cameras and alarm system to both Catherine and me. It was all part of the plan. Then came the question I had been waiting for, the one I knew was coming. What if we're, doing stuff and don't want it recorded? Catherine asked, looking a little embarrassed. But I knew exactly why she was asking. The security guy, probably used to these questions, just nodded and said it was a common concern. He showed us on the home computer how to disable specific cameras for privacy. As I walked him out, I took the opportunity to ask if we could set up email notifications whenever the cameras were turned off, just as an extra security measure. He came back in, helped me set up the email alerts, and then left. Everything was falling into place perfectly. Now all I had to do was wait. Next, I contacted a family law attorney in the area. I wanted to make sure my plan was legally sound, and that I wouldn't end up owing Catherine anything or having to give her a share of any property. I wasn't sure if we'd be considered common-law spouses, and as Rachel's sole heir, I didn't want any surprises if Catherine tried to claim partial ownership of anything. Big thanks to that lawyer. He assured me that even though Catherine and I had been together for almost 4 years, we hadn't lived together long enough to be considered common law. Since I paid all the bills myself and nothing was under her name, she had no legal grounds to claim anything. That was a relief. I told Catherine I'd booked her an all-expenses-paid trip to a tropical spa resort for a week, no limits. She could bring 2 of her friends, I said, then come home to the biggest surprise of her life. When I told her, she squealed like a kid in a candy store, clearly thrilled. Then I casually mentioned that I'd be stuck in the city next week prepping for a big client meeting and wouldn't be back until Monday, exactly when she'd be heading out for her trip. She seemed a little bummed by that, but I reassured her it would all be worth it once she returned. What I didn't tell her was that I'd already planned a 2-week vacation for myself. I was going to be on the other side of the country, just far enough away to de-stress before the storm hit and enjoy a taste of freedom for a while. 2 weeks later, on a Sunday, I came back to my hometown. I drove past my house and sure enough, there was Harry's car parked in my driveway just like that first time. I parked a little down the street, then checked the cameras. Sure enough, he and Catherine were asleep in my bed. No surprise, really, especially since I'd recorded them hooking up nearly every day I'd been gone. We did our usual couple stuff. She went back to sleep and I, of course, lay awake next morning. A taxi came for her and her girlfriends. Once they were gone, I waited a few hours and then set the final pieces in motion. I called a buddy who runs a moving company asking if he could help me pack up and haul stuff. That Friday we scheduled a time and I said some boxes would go into storage. He agreed. Then I started boxing up Catherine's possessions. Later that day, the police called to say they'd recovered some items suspected to be stolen from me during that burglary, and asked me to come in to ID them. I grinned, pleased that my plan to frame Harry was working, and told them I'd be right over. Of course, not all my missing stuff had turned up yet because some was still stashed at his place and the cops hadn't searched his home fully by then. The whole town was gossiping about it. Small town. Word travels fast. Harry was disgraced and quickly fired for drug possession and stolen property. My supervisors apologized to me on the company's behalf that evening. I went to my parents' house and filled them in minus certain details. I told them I'd be moving back to the city for my new promotion without cheating. Catherine, they were upset. I hadn't told them sooner, but relieved I was keeping it together and not stooping to Harry and Catherine's level. They didn't love my plan of basically vanishing from Catherine's life, but after some tears and laughter I drove home. On Friday afternoon, after a crazy week arranging cleaning services and prepping the home to rent out, plus wrapping up tasks at the local office, I packed my car, stopped by my parents for one last goodbye, then swung by Becca's place. Becca was Rachel's childhood best friend, and the only person besides my lawyer who knew the real story. Without her help, I couldn't have organized everything so quickly. I gave Becca a large envelope containing all the evidence of Catherine's cheating, plus a letter, plus some legal documents from my attorney. The documents basically said Catherine was forbidden from contacting me and outlined how she could retrieve her belongings from a storage unit I'd rented. Then I said a quick farewell and headed off to the city. On Sunday morning, I woke up to tons of missed calls and messages. Apparently, Catherine had come home early because someone tipped her off that something was going on in town. She found our place empty with a for rent sign out front, panicked. She drove to my parents' house, but they shut the door on her. She then started calling everyone until she finally got hold of Becca, who told her about the envelope. Word is she didn't take it well at all. Not surprising. She left me multiple furious texts, accusing me of framing Harry. I worried she might show up at my new doorstep, but she never did. Now, to address a few common questions I get asked about all this: what happened to Harry and why did I do him so dirty? Harry faces a few months in jail. It is his first offense, so he might get out early. I felt it was necessary. I left out key details that had let anyone identify me for sure and changed the setting so this story could be anywhere. There was already enough evidence in Harry's home. I just gave the cops a reason to investigate him. No regrets, since he knew me and Rachel our whole lives and was well aware how hard it was for me to get back on my feet after her death. What about Catherine? She prided herself on being some sort of socialite, her word all about her image. I knew that public humiliation would wreck her. Word of her affair spread all over town. So yep, her precious reputation was toast. I hear she left for another state recently. Since staying there was no longer comfortable, were my actions with her belongings legal from a moral standpoint? Yeah, I realized it's pretty messed up to hype up about this big once-in-a-lifetime surprise, only to yank the rug out from under her. But that was the point. I wanted her to feel that collapse the same way I felt betrayed legally. I had every right to do what I did. She had zero claim to my property, and my lawyer made sure of it. Is this story fake, or am I just some fame-seeking sociopath? People will say whatever. Maybe we all have a bit of a dark side. You can judge me however you want. I don't care. So what do you all think? Was I justified in what I did? As for me, I personally think Catherine deserved more comeuppance, but sure, I guess letting her stay for an extra 6 weeks was me being weirdly soft on her. Meanwhile, maybe some would say I went too far punishing Harry, sending him to jail. He's definitely a scumbag who knew how devastated I was after Rachel's passing, and yet he did this. Whether he truly deserved prison time is debatable, I guess legally. No, but my personal stance says yes. As for Catherine, I never confronted her face to face. Maybe that was cowardly. Just letting her keep sleeping with me for a while, until it was convenient for my plan. Some folks find that unthinkable, but hey, that's how I chose to handle it. Anyway, drop your thoughts in the comments whether you agree or disagree. Thanks for sticking around till the end. Go check out our previous video linked right here. And I hope your own relationships are drama-free. Take care. Moral of the story: they say time heals all wounds. But some betrayals cut so deep, time only dulls the blade, never removes it. I'd already buried one love, fought a war in court to hold the people responsible accountable, and clawed my way back to some version of peace. Then came Catherine and Harry. This isn't a story about heartbreak. It's about calculated revenge, delivered with a smile and the full weight of patience, planning, and poetic justice.